So let's talk more about the vice president's rallies in North Carolina yesterday. As we mentioned, she received a raucous reception, huge crowd last night inside the Greensboro Coliseum complex. That was the roar from 17,000 people when she took the stage. The vice president recapped the debate and pushed one of her core messages of her campaign.
On Tuesday night, I talked about issues that I know matter to the families across America, like bringing down the cost of living, investing in America's small businesses, protecting reproductive freedom, safe and secure. But that's not what we heard from Donald Trump. Instead, and I called it at the beginning of the debate, it was the same old show. Same old tired playbook we've heard for years, with no plan for how he would address the needs of the American people. Well, folks, look, it's time to turn the page.
Prior to Greensboro, the vice president spoke to 7,500 voters at an event in Charlotte, where people began gathering in line several hours before the start time. Once the rally kicked off, Harris highlighted the flood of Republican endorsements that she has recently received.
Over 200 people who worked for President George H.W. Bush, President George W. Bush, John McCain, and Mitt Romney have endorsed me for president. Former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congresswoman Liz Cheney are supporting me as well. Because, as they said, we have a duty as citizens to put country above partisanship and defend our Constitution.
I'd say on that point, it's overwhelming, Sam Stein, her crowds, which is something Trump talked about. He got he fell for it. So it was painful to watch how quickly he fell for Kamala Harris, kind of making fun of his rallies in a very real and realistic way, that he talks about Hannibal Lecter and makes up crap and just throws it out there and really speaks about nothing, but most importantly, does not talk about you, the American people, and what he could do for the American people. But even more so, he was very rattled about crowd size, saying that nobody comes to her rallies. And so, again, if anyone wants to check, there's 17,000 people at one rally alone yesterday, and they were going wild. But to a point she was making about the 200 Republicans who are endorsing her, I do think there's a decision to be made by former President George W. Bush and others that are very high-level Republicans. And if they truly believe that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, but if they also truly believe that there is a Republican Party to be saved, that there is a Republican Party to be rebuilt, that there is a Republican Party that should be a part of this democracy that we live in, isn't the only way to go at this point is to endorse Kamala Harris and let the Republican Party rebuild?
Very, very good questions. First, on the rally size, Trump will probably respond by alleging that this is all AI generated, right, and that this can't possibly be real. Secondarily, on the issue of Republicans supporting Harris, first, it was a little bit disorienting, I got to be honest, to see a massive stadium filled with Democrats cheering the mention of Dick Cheney. 20 years ago, that would have been unfathomable. But we're in a very weird, disorienting time. And Mika, I think you bring up the right question, which is, do certain Republicans who we presume or know don't like Donald Trump, want him to fail, do they feel a moral obligation to not just say they're not voting against Trump, but to make the affirmative case for voting for Harris? Now,
Yeah.
Dick and Liz Cheney have done that. Alberto Gonzalez yesterday did that. The question on the mind of people like us at the Bulwark is, will people, we presume George W. Bush, Condoleezza Rice, will those people who we presume do not support Trump, will they come out and say, in fact, it's good for both the Republic and the Republican Party to see Harris win? Good for the Republican Party in that we need to have a saner version of the Republican Party, and the only way that that can happen is if we prove that Trumpism finally and fully is a loser.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, Donald Trump's not a Republican. Like, if everybody just really looked at the reality of Donald Trump, the person leading the Republican Party right now is anything but a Republican and will throw away any issue if it doesn't serve him personally, even abortion. But he's already done so much damage on that I'd like to point out, Willie, one thing about what Sam said about that crowd of Democrats supporting Kamala, clapping about Dick Cheney. I can tell you, I know personally, that there are some Republicans in those crowd. Republican women especially are gathering together and going to Kamala Harris rallies. And as her campaign and Kamala Harris will tell you, they are welcome to be there.
Yeah, Republicans for Harris is what the campaign calls it. And let's not forget that group of Nikki Haley voters that are potentially up for grabs, who say they cannot abide Donald Trump and they need to be convinced that Kamala Harris is the choice. I will say, Sam and I are living in the same headspace. I watched that clip and I thought, my God, go back to 2004 and an arena full of Democrats cheering for Darth Vader himself, Dick Cheney, who was the arch villain of American politics, according to Democrats. It's an extraordinary time for sure. So